Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I am John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic for you today. Let's do it. Haunted trail or house workers of Reddit. What's the creepiest thing you've experienced while on the job? Please remember to like, share, comment, hype, listen, and ask for shoutouts. And subscribe. Worked in a haunted attraction for 5 years, and one comes to mind. I played a stereotypical crazy doctor in a scene with other actors. The basic layout is you would enter the hospital, get on an elevator, fake, go down a toxic hallway, and finally meet me. The walls were thin and made of plywood. I remember one night, group walks in already screaming, I think, awesome, easy scare and easy group. They step in the elevator and lose it. I hear them run out of the elevator and toward the hall. I get ready in my normal position. I would stand behind the door to my office and scare people out of the scene. This didn't happen. This group crashes through the wall. I scream like a little girl, which scares them more. They run through another wall. At this point, I just want them out to get my scene back in order, but then another actor from another scene shows up at the exit with a chainsaw. The groups run through their makeshift doors back through my scene. We had to then scare them back through the scene to get them to move on. People were banned from bringing chainsaws in my scene after that. Worst thing I witnessed while working in one, aside from the typical piss shit vomit, was this one time toward the end of our run. We would go for about 4 to 5 hours a night if it was busy. Reset times in between groups were exhausting. Some really horrible kids came through kicking the sets and props and trying to hit some of the actors. One of the girls, B, had her own room in which she sat in a really dark corner on a metal barrel. She would normally scare people by rattling it or knocking a stick against it to get their attention. But in doing this one time, these kids ran over to her and started laughing and trying to choke her out. We only found out about it because the next group that followed these kids found B passed out on the floor. Security grabbed those fuckers, and the police came and took them away. Not sure what happened to them, but B ended up having to go to the hospital and didn't return for the rest of the season, which was sad, because despite her scare being very simple, it was so good at getting people moving through the corridor. It was a shit night. I was volunteering at a haunted trail when I was about 12 because we had an assignment that entailed doing community service for school. Hearing this, I thought the best thing I could do was working for free as a zombie. What could be better? So, the night rolls around, and I'm fitted with my zombie costume. We walk out into the woods where I'm led to my coffin behind a chain that separates the trail from the path the folks walk on through the forest. When the tour guide would show up with a new group of people, they would wave a flashlight near me as my cue for me to pop up out of the coffin and hit a fake dismembered leg against the side. Night starts, a few groups go by, and I'm feeling pretty good about the whole thing. About halfway through the night, I see the flashlight and do my usual routine. A little kid shrieks, and for God only knows what reason, the kid's dad looks at his son, looks at me, and starts sprinting at me. He clears the chain easily, runs right up to me, pulls me out of the coffin with his bare hands, puts his fingers in my face and says, "Cut it out, you little shit." He then walks back to his son, consoling him, and they walk back through the trail. I was flabbergasted, and I just left the trail right then and there, walking past groups in full zombie attire. I then walked home, took off everything, and just sat stunned in my bathroom, trying to make sense of everything and not cry. To this day, I still have absolutely no idea why a guy would take his 5-year-old kid into a haunted trail and start physically roughing up the ghosts and goblins working in there. I don't know what happened with that father and son, but the attraction after me was a guy dressed as Leatherface, running out of the forest with a real chainsaw. Can only imagine. I worked at the Markov's Haunted Forest in Maryland, which is widely regarded as one of the best haunted attractions on the East Coast. It has 2 paths that go winding through the forest, filled with different scenes and props ranging from church basements to a creepy monkey village, to just narrow pitch-black tunnels you navigate by feel, I was in the church basement scene this night, and I had a sweet spot where none of the lights touched, making it pitch black. People would walk up to me suspicious that someone would be there, but it really was pitch black. They would feel reassured because they were so close. They would have to see someone if they were there, but nope, hey, it's me. Tons of great scares. The trails were always busy from around 8 p.m. to 1 a.m., but this night there was a strange gap of no people for roughly 30 minutes. That never happens. Finally, a family came along, 2 teen girls and their parents. I got these girls good, real good, like I could see the imminent death in their eyes good. Then, after they passed, it was another 30 minutes pause of people only to have the normal flow of people return. Later on, we found out that it was the Obama girls going through the trails with Secret Service acting as their parents. No one was told ahead of time for security reasons, obviously, and we only learned after the fact. The gaps of people were to allow them to slip in and enjoy the trail without anyone else having the opportunity to realize who they were and interrupt them. So I got to scare the hell out of the Obama girls. That was cool. I enjoy this topic. We don't cover it too often, but usually a few times a year. So good to hear, stories from inside. I've been to Fright Fest back in the day, and which they did this thing in New Jersey, this big thing, and also in Madison Square Garden. And some guy had a football jersey on with his last name, and then somebody called him out. One of the workers called. He's like, "Hey, Jastrzemski, And I gotta turn around and punch him in the face, You gotta really try to control your... Granted, it's a high-stress time for people, but my goodness, you know where you are. Don't just turn around punching people. So, anyway, I enjoy people that do what they do for haunted houses. It's fun. So, hope you guys are having a good time, and we'll see you guys tomorrow. Have a good one. I worked a haunt one year and was set up in a butcher room. Had a pig mask and a table saw. No one cared where the saw sound was coming from, just that it was loud and scary. But the best part was the guy missing part of his arm working the room. He had lost a portion of his arm right below the elbow, still had his elbow and about 2 inches of forearm. He'd sit on the floor and prop a fake severed arm near his stump and pretend to be cutting through his arm with a knife. Attendees could hear almost there, as they walked into the room. Once he grabbed the fake arm with his good hand, he started waving the stump. I'd seen full-grown men push their girlfriends and wives away and run at full speed. It was hilarious. In 6th grade, our elementary school did a haunted house fundraiser. It wasn't anything big. They set up a maze in one of the classrooms and had a bunch of decorations and people popping out of place to scare everyone. It was actually pretty well put together and scary. I volunteered to work because I love to scare people. Anyways, my job was to monitor the maze and help anyone or fix stuff. I brought my werewolf mask and I would stand still like a statue and tap on people's shoulders when they turned around or jump at them if I had the chance. There was this dad walking his young son through, and it was obvious he was terrified. His dad was comforting him by saying that it was fake and he shouldn't be worried. I didn't want to scare him, so I just stood still. His dad then pointed me and said, "Look, the werewolf is fake too." And then to show how fake I was, he smacked my mask. It wasn't hard and didn't hurt, but my mask and glasses came right off. He apologized, left, and saying he didn't know I was real. I wasn't mad or anything. I just thought it was hilarious that I actually looked like a prop. Due to my size, there are typically only a few roles I can play at these kinds of things. One of the most memorable ones I had through working was a friend. He rented out this big house with a lake out back. So while they all worked on what they were going to do, I had to choose between Bigfoot or Jason Voorhees. Lo and behold, 3 nights later, I'm freezing my ass off in 2 dry suits with a Jason costume over them, getting terrifying people because I was so out of place. The rest of the haunted house was vampire themed. And then you got Outsider, and I stiffly pulled myself out of the water, grab the fake knife, and run at them. The night passes on until I pull myself out, grab my knife, and charge the group. Then I hear it. 3 dudes in the group pulled a fake sword, yell, "Deuce Volt, slay the demon," and run toward me as well. All 4 of us just started laughing over what had just happened. That's the best I can think of right now, but I'll put more in if I can think of them. When I worked at a haunted house, I was put in a scene with one of my good friends and my twin sister. They decided to put us in a dollhouse with lots of mangled porcelain dolls and stuffed animals with their body parts missing. My good friend is a very small girl, and she could fit into the smallest of places. There was this grandfather clock that we had in the first room, and she would remove the pendulum and hide in there while we shouted at patrons to play hide and seek with us. She would scare so many people with that spot, it was unreal. We also played the twin thing off as much as possible. Both me and my sister, being small as well, I would hide behind a small dresser and get a jump scare as soon as a group came through. Right after my scare, my twin would get them from the other side of the room, and we would come together like the twins from The Shining. You wouldn't believe how many people are scared of little kids. I had a blast making people fall on their asses while they were also miming them with the twin thing. Ah, fun times. Worked at a haunt for 5 years. Had to quit after my last year because of 2 incidences that I caused on accident. Before the stories, I need to paint a picture. I'm 6'4" and close to 400 pounds with a 2-foot tall mohawk at the time. First incident was a coworker was traveling through the house using pop doors to get through quicker to their room. I heard them coming and figured I would try and scare them. They come in my hallway, and I pop my head around the corner at them. He reaches for the wall as his whole body goes stiff and he falls flat on his face, breaking his nose and going into a seizure. Later, found out that he stopped taking his meds, so I didn't feel as bad as I did when it happened. The second one was the last scare in a haunt that I ever did. An older gentleman and his granddaughter came making their way to my hallway. I stood in the middle of the hallway so they could see me in the strobe light, then jumped in my pop door to scare them. I pop out, and they both stumble backwards into a corner, so I pin them in the corner with my arms, yelling that they will never leave because I'm going to eat them alive. The man's eyes stared at me and slowly opened wider and wider before his eyes rolled into the back of his head as he slid limp down to the floor in the corner. I drop the act and grab his hand, asking if he is okay, and he doesn't respond. I yell for help and that we have had a party down. The house owner and makeup artist come flying into the living hallway, telling me to get back. They call 911 and they get there a few minutes later. The EMTs tell us that he is having a heart attack as they get the doors open for the stretcher. At that point, I walked to the back room and sat down with a bottle of water and started to cry. I felt so bad that I took off my costume and left and never went back. Found out from a friend that the man came back a few weeks later to talk to me. He told them he felt bad that I quit and that out of all the haunted houses he'd went to, it was me that got him the best and he loved it. I still feel bad for both of those incidents almost 19 years later. I once worked as the sound video monitor technician for a popular haunted house in Houston, Texas. My primary duty was to keep an eye on the camera screens for security and liability purposes, as well as adjusting the sound makers and music volume and content when needed. I remember one night a long time ago, we had a group of women on a bachelorette party walk through the first room of the haunted house. As I was monitoring the cameras when they walked in, I noticed that one of the women in particular, the woman who was getting married, was clearly drunk at the time and appeared to be the most frightened of all the women as they all creeped their way into the dark room. She was literally holding her breasts as she slowly proceeded through the room in the dark, apparently to ease her reaction to anything that pops out at her. Since our cameras having night vision capable lenses, I could see everything clear as day. Then, once the first scene commenced, a first monster popped out around the corner dressed as a crazy doctor with a knife. The bride-to-be was so ridiculously terrified that she began convulsing for a few seconds and then decided to powerfully tackle a coworker of mine, let's call him Jeff, against a brick wall so hard that it knocked the wind out of him. Somehow her shirt got ripped and her breasts were literally hanging out. Jeff was on the ground at this point, struggling to breathe. She then pulled out a taser gun she had on her, which we have no idea how she got in with, and proceeded to fire the taser directly at Jeff's chest, rendering him completely unconscious. I then immediately stopped everything. I shut off all the background music, the fog, mist, turned on all the lights, and got onto the intercom speaker system and said with a very stern voice, "Exit the facility now. You guys are done. Security will be waiting for you outside." She and her friends began crying drunkenly and uncontrollably. Our site manager was on the scene within seconds of hearing my voice over the speaker system. He checked on Jeff, who was unconscious, and told the women to exit the nearest door immediately, and that charges would be pressed against them for this. We then had to contact the police and get them involved because Jeff almost had to go to the hospital. Not only did our business press charges against the women and her friends, but Jeff also pressed charges for assault and battery. That was one hell of a night. We lost a lot of business that night because of this incident. When I was a teenager, my younger brothers and I decided to set up front walkway with some scare the trick-or-treater props. First, the setup. Our house had a front hall walkway that was bordered by the wall of the house on the left, and a rickety wooden fence with a gate on the right. The carport was on the other side of the wooden fence. The front door faced the carport and was directly across from the gate. Basically, you had to walk through a narrow hallway to get into the front door on the left, or through the gate to a carport on the right. My brother hauled a record player onto the roof and had an album of spooky sounds that they put on. This was in 1975 or so, and we were poor. We didn't even have speakers, just the loud, tinny sound of a portable turntable. We made a human figure of stuffed clothing and hung it by the neck from the rafters of the walkway. Brother Bob rigged little red lights for the eyes. Brother David built a coffin and placed it on the side of the house in the walkway. He dressed himself as Dracula and took his place in the coffin. Bob dressed himself as some sort of monster and then draped chains all over him, his chest, and the gate, essentially chaining himself to the fence. I dressed as a witch and waited at the door to pass out candy. The overall effect from the street wasn't too intimidating, just the music and the dead hanging body. The plan was to scare the bejesus out of the kids after they passed the entrance. And scare them we did. Now remember, this is 1975. Parents stood at the sidewalk, if there were parents in attendance at all. These brave little kids walked up our sidewalk with both eyes fixed on the dead body. Once they got past that horror, they were now in the walkway where David would be set up in his coffin, scaring them into running toward the front door. Once there, they never even saw Bob until he lunged at them, the chains holding him back. I would open the door, cackling like a witch I am, to give them candy. However, the poor traumatized kids would blast into the house screaming and crying. Not a one of them would agree to go back out the front door or come near me. Either so my mother had to scare some kids, escort them through the kitchen and out into the carport so they could run screaming into their parents' arms. We were a success. Every kid in our neighborhood probably had nightmares about us that night. We never did it again though. It was a one-night show, but our legend lived on from 1975 until they sold the house in 1988. My parents never had a single trick-or-treater again. Mom would stand at the door with her little bags of candy and hear the kids screaming at their parents to run past the house. Nobody came to the door. Nobody. Ever again. I used to work at a popular Halloween attraction called the Slaughterhouse. If you're in Arizona, you've probably heard of it. Technically, I was a volunteer, but they donated money to my school if we worked, so it counts to me. I was working there before it was all set up as a Halloween attraction. At the time, it was just an empty, abandoned slaughterhouse that people used to have raves in. And even without all the spooky put up and people running around in straitjackets, that place is creepy as... My classmates and I were charged with cleaning that place up, and we found some weird-ass shit in there. Firstly, we had to clean off the roof balcony. It was covered in mummified dead cats. I had no clue why there were so many dead cats up there, but it was very chilling. On the second floor, there was a chapel. I'm not really sure why a slaughterhouse needed a chapel, but there was one in there. That room was absolutely horrifying. It was uncomfortably dark in there, and the moment you crossed the threshold of the door, you immediately felt freezing. I went in there once alone and I could see my breath. We ended up leaving it be because no one wanted to go in there. We just left the pews be. During the actual haunts, there was a lot of mishaps that never happened before. And I worked the haunt when it was at different locations. Nothing like this had ever happened before. One part of the haunt has a room called the plexiglass room. This was sturdy. It was basically a huge, thick window, and people in straitjackets stood behind it and screamed and threw themselves at it and threw various in the rooms, chairs, barrels, etc., at it as people walked past. I literally hit that thing with a hammer before, and it was completely fine. Well, first day we open, one of the actors throws a plastic jug at the plexiglass, and it shatters all over a bunch of people walking through, and we have to shut down that part of the haunt and clean it all up. The next thing that happened maybe a week later. A group of girls are walking through the haunt, and everything is fine, and they're finishing it up. At the exit, there's no actors, so as not to scare people and make them fall down the stairs. Well, something spooks the girl, and she books it out of the haunt, trips, and falls over the railing and bands on her neck. We have the shut down the haunt again, and I think she may have broken her neck. I don't know. We didn't get any info after the ambulance took her away. Then there was just various parts of the set falling over, actors getting injured, a bee flew up my nose while I was working, and actors getting scrambled and scared shitless. I'm 100% sure that place is haunted or cursed or something. There's been quite a few deaths in there. Back when it was an actual slaughterhouse, an employee slipped on the old lift in the building and fell off, and the lift crushed him. My boyfriend's father is a paramedic and often had to respond to people who'd become shell-shocked, ODing back when the slaughterhouse was used for raves. I won't go back in there, even to enjoy the haunts. That place is being creepy. Worked at a haunted house a few years during high school to get a mental image To get to where I was, you went through the house, a ton of rooms made of plywood, walk outside to a kind of hall, around two corners to where my friend was hiding, turn, there I was hiding in a church, and around another corner to where my other friend was hiding with a chainsaw. A few stories. Had an older lady, 50s to 60s, walked past me, and she goes in the most upbeat voice, "I got so scared in there I almost farted," to her friend. I had to take a minute. There was some teenager guy going through, trying to be the cool kid, acting like a badass in front of his friends, harassing monsters, trying to touch us, etc. The owner of the maze came through and grabbed this kid by his arm and growls, "If you touch my monsters, I'll let them touch you." Then he points at me in my zombie outfit. I bit down on the blood capsule in my mouth and grinned. The kid pissed himself and ran. One slow night around midnight, we heard a group coming through the house. Now, at the end of the hall outside of the house was a guy dressed as a scarecrow with a shovel. He was supposed to become animated and scare people or whatever. Anyway, he had fallen asleep, leaning on his shovel, and when the group went by, he fell right in front of them and scared the crap out of them. My friends and I ran a neighborhood haunted house for nearly 15 years in NKC. No. Probably the best story I have is the one where we had chainsaw near the end of the house. It was a corner where the chainsaw guy hid and then a straight shot out the back to the exit. Well, this one girl gets so freaked out by the chainsaw firing up that she takes off at a sprint and keeps running almost a full city block down the street from the haunted house. Went back in and high-fived chainsaw guy just for the laughs he provided. Second story, I was working as a slide safety operator at the Beast haunted house in Kansas City, and my job was mostly just being in the open and make sure people are being safe. I was still in costume, but for the most part, they just wanted to make sure everything was okay. These three little 10 to 12-year-olds, wise asses, come down the slide, and by the time the third gets down, the other tries to sneak up behind me and scare me. I'm at this point bent over checking the slide, so I was just 2 seconds, stand up to my full height, turn around, so I'm literally lording over them. And I had taken a huge lungful of air and just let out the most terrifying sound I've ever made in my life. I lost my voice for at least an hour. Two of them just dropped to the floor. One of them starts crab walking backwards right into Jack the Ripper, who was in my area as the main scare. Needless to say, I still think that he was stains in his underwear to this day.